Hi, welcome to this Bible study. Now, this one Bible study, it's called Man's Put Downs Are God's Setups. And what I'd like to do is just look at the example of some men of God in the Bible who loved the Lord. They were seeking to do the Lord's work, and God used them. But in amongst that, of course, as in all cases, when you seek to do the Lord's work, there'll always be put downs and oppositions, people who don't understand what God is doing. And what I've found is a pattern in the Bible that when men come up with put downs, they're sort of making fun of what you're doing for the Lord. Quite often, in an ironic way, the things they say are actually true, but they're actually affirming the Lord's goodness and how God has got his hand in your life. So I'll show you this with a few examples that they'll just be a blessing to you. Okay, so the first example is Joseph. We read about him in Genesis 37. We know that he had these dreams, and of course he was telling his brother. There was one dream, wasn't it, about the barley sheaves, that they would bow down before him. Now, it's good to talk about the Lord's goodness, isn't it? In the Psalms, it talks about declaring the Lord's goodness. When Jesus healed, he said, go and tell your family what great things God hath done for you. So definitely, we should be people who confess the Lord's goodness. Sometimes with specific things that maybe God shows us, sometimes there can be occasions where it's maybe better to keep them to ourselves and maybe wait for God to manifest them rather than always, the minute they happen, just go and sort of like blab them to other people. Now, so one of the examples is Joseph. We know that how he told his brothers. The problem was there was favoritism in the family, and he told his brothers his dreams, which seemed to antagonize him. And then one day, the father Jacob sent him to go and meet his brothers, just to, I think, to check that they were okay. And he was on his way then, and he met a certain man on the way. And so I'm reading from Genesis 37:15, and it says, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed thence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. Very significant, that, because obviously meant it in some sarcastic way. Let's see what will become of his dreams. Well, of course, in a sense, they were kind of prophesying their own destiny, because they did see what became of Joseph's dreams, that they were bowing down before him when Joseph was promoted. Obviously, Joseph had a few ups and downs, and God had to deal with them along the way, but obviously God promoted him to this position when he was up in the palace. Then the brothers came to get grain in Egypt, and of course they did bow before Joseph, so they did see what became of his dreams. But obviously God was using that as part of his plan to go and save people from the famine. So it was maybe an act of betrayal, selling him into slavery, but God used it to fulfill his purposes. So that was Joseph. So the other example is King David, just before he slew Goliath. And of course, he was always kind of, in a sense, the opposite of Joseph. He was, in a sense, the least, as it seems, the least favoured person in the family. And he was just out, I think, feeding the sheep, and his father Jesse had sent him to bring some food to his brothers who were on the battlefield with Saul. And when he was arriving, he was talking about it. And the men of Israel said, "Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel." And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, "What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And the people answered him after this manner, saying, "So shall it be done to the man that killeth him." But then David's elder brother Eliab and Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, "Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle." Well, David in himself, he hadn't come down to see the battle. He'd come down to bring food to his brothers. But they were, to me, Eliab is full of his own pride, selfish, ungrateful to David. But the irony is that even though David came as the message boy, and Eliab said, "Thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle." Now, even though that hadn't been David's intention, in a sense, David, he did more than see the battle. He slew Goliath and then led the children of Israel to victory over the Philistines. So he did a lot more attempt, and I'm sure this was God's planning, although David didn't realize it. It was Eliab's sarcastic comment that had almost like affirmed God's calling over David, that he would win this battle. And then, of course, we never hear of Eliab again, as far as I know. But obviously we hear plenty of David, how God had blessed him. Okay, and the other example as well of people being put down was, if you go to Luke chapter 15, beginning of 15, talking about Jesus, "Then drew near unto him all the publicans and sinners for to hear him," that was Jesus, "and the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying, This man receiveth sinners and eateth with them." And that's when Jesus told the different parables about losing the sheep. But obviously, in their sort of criticisms in the Pharisees, they said that Jesus went to be with sinners. Well, that was quite true, wasn't it? That Jesus said it's not the sick who need the healthy who need the doctor, but the sick. So Jesus came for sinners. So the Pharisees, in their sarcasm, they just affirmed God's calling. Jesus came for sinners, and I'm glad that he did. And I say, yes, no, bring it on. And then we know in Mark, when Jesus was on the cross, he was ridiculed again when they said, he saved others, but himself he cannot save. Well, in a sense, for Jesus to save others, he had to be our substitute for sin on the cross. So he couldn't be saved from that. He could have if he'd wanted to, but he was obedient to the Father. He took our punishment. And because of that, we know God, we're saved because of what Jesus has done. So in amongst ridicule, it talks about how he kind of scorned the shame, but he looked ahead just to the wonderful future with God and just being with us. So praise the name of Jesus, and just thank you for joining me in this Bible study. And I just trust you've been blessed out of the Bible, just as I have. Okay, thank you, and God bless you.